Hi everybody, Hannah here, and this is my nature project, Welcoming Spring with planter boxes. And the age group I worked with were 2 and 3-year-olds, and where I completed my project was at my center, 10 Mile Academy. To kick off my nature project, I wanted to start by setting the scene and sharing the focus and what has guided my work. So my driving question that anchored my exploration was how can including natural materials indoors and outdoors nurture a child's sense of ownership and connection to the natural world? Working with 2 and 3-year-olds, I've noticed how much they gravitate towards sensory experiences and hands-on exploration. However, I also noticed that our center currently has very limited resources when it comes to providing natural materials in children's everyday environment, both indoors and outdoors. If you can see from this photo, our center doesn't even have grass. We have turf, which is synthetic and it is not a nature formed material. So that gap really inspired me to take on this project. Not only to bring more of these opportunities into our space, but also to spark that shift in how we can view nature as part of daily curriculum, not just every once in a while or when we go on walks. Um, it's every day. And my goal was to create more moments where children can explore, wonder, and build meaningful connections with the world around them, both inside the classroom and out. Now we dive into my why behind my project. Why it's so important to foster a sense of ownership in young children when it comes to nature. When we give children the chance to plant something, to water it, to watch it grow, they begin to feel a sense of responsibility and pride. And that's what I mean by ownership. It's not just about participating or watching a teacher do it, but involving them fully in every step of the process and truly feeling connected and invested in the living world that surrounds them. By bringing in natural materials into both spaces, our indoor and our outdoor spaces, we're giving children consistent hands on opportunities that build connection. And when this becomes a part of their everyday routine, it doesn't just become a fun activity, it becomes a part of who they are. And this daily contact with nature also supports the development of empathy, patience, and mindfulness, which are skills that go far beyond early childhood and way into lifelong emotional intelligence. And they are very vital to 2 and 3-year-old age groups. And finally, nature rich environments support the whole child. They engage children physically, emotionally, and intellectually, offering a well rounded learning experience that aligns with what we know about how young children grow best. The goals I set for this project, I set several goals as you can see, but not because of high expectations, um, but out of a deep hope and belief in the potential of this project in sparking change. As you can see from this photo, our center currently offers very limited natural materials, both indoors and out. This is our playground. So while we do what we can, like taking walks in our community, and we're very fortunate that we can do this pretty frequently to explore the natural world, it's just not enough. It's not within our reach. Our playground, the only natural element is the line of trees that sit just beyond the fence, and the children cannot reach them. And while it's important because they can see them, they can't engage with them. And that's why my number one goal, above all of the goals I set, my number one goal is bringing nature within reach. Not just something they observe from a distance, not something that occurs every now and then, but something they can touch, smell, and interact with and care for. I also want to foster a sense of connection, care, and curiosity about the natural world. My goal is to create this daily with nature based experiences, both inside and outside of our classroom. because toddlers thrive through repetition and hands-on learning. I wanted to give them the opportunity to feel pride in caring for a plant, to get their hands in the dirt, to feel the texture of a pine cone, or watch something grow because of their actions that they took. More than anything, I simply wanted to add joy and wonder and growth to our classroom environment. And I believe nature has the power to do just that. When I observed our space, I realized that we offer no opportunity for self-help or responsibility outdoors. We do inside the classrooms, but we don't offer this outdoors. And so while I was trying to brainstorm what to do for this project, I realized where I originally wanted to offer some more nature-based or planter boxes, which was on the turf along the playground. We didn't have water access over there, and we do in this concreted area. And then a light bulb went off. I was like, this is the space that needs used. We don't need to start in the large area. We need to start somewhere small and then grow from there. And so I saw this concreted area as my class was lined up, waiting their turn to go on the playground, and I said, this unused space, no more. This is where magic needs to happen. The longer I stared at this unused space on the concrete, I was inspired by the photos from our textbook Nature Play at Home. So this was kind of my vision board I saw for the space, and what I believed would be most successful was an open communal space where tools were accessible, a space for all children of all age groups to engage in nature, as well as an opportunity for self-help skills and responsibilities and for peer cooperation. So these pull in my goals as well as have some inspiration moving forward. For this project, we reached out to our families for support in donations, and we were met with an overwhelming amount of gratitude and support. And we had almost every single item on our list donated to us, that we spent less than $100 on transforming the space. So I am so grateful that we have such amazing families and we have that connection with them. So the items we were donated were 5 planter boxes, 2 large bags of soil, and like they were farmer large bags of soil, not ones you just purchase in a store. 20 bags of seeds, and this was a variety of flowers and vegetables, 2 tomato plants, a basil plant, fairy garden accessories, and then gloves we just had families bring on the day of our planting day. The items we had to purchase were gardening tools, like little shovels, rakes, as well as the fence planters. Because I wanted to not only have them at their level, but I wanted to kind of transform the fence line space and have planters hanging from our fence line. So we purchased those, as well as label stakes and planter pots for inside the classroom. So that totaled to $93. This project was fairly simple, so I wouldn't classify any risks or hazards going in. However, I did have my own personal concerns, and the first one being my confidence in successfully planting and growing anything, because I do not have a green thumb. I've killed every plant I've ever put in the ground, and I wanted to set my children up for success. So that was my main concern, was my confidence in producing any plant. Overwatering was my second one. I've always overwatered, and I know after my research, if you flood your planter boxes in the beginning, you're not going to grow anything. It just sets you up for failure right from the start. My last concern was that because of my children's age, being so young, that they would be more interested in digging in the dirt and not really focused in planting the seeds or getting involved in the process. Some benefits from this project, though, was teaching independent skills about the process of growing our own food. This was a hands-on sensory experience that further ignited interest in planting and farming. And then my strategies for solving my concerns. My number one concern was my confidence in producing anything. I had parent volunteers to come help plant, sow the seeds. I had a parent walk me through step by step of how to successfully sow the seeds, what to look out for, the thinning process, if it rains outside. She was amazing, gave me all the advice, everything I needed. Number two was doing research prior to the day of planting. That played into, I believe, our whole success was because I wasn't confident in this area. The only way to gain confidence is to gain more knowledge until you feel comfortable. And then number three was giving the children plenty of time in the beginning to just explore with the dirt in the shovels and the scoops. Instead of just diving right in and being like, here's your seeds, go plant. We gave them the tools and materials and let them pour in the soil themselves and just dig in the soil. And we did that a couple days leading up to our planting day with our families. And I think that was very successful in allowing children to be more engaged with the planting process later on. My timeline, I wanted to keep it fairly simple. The first thing I needed to start with was getting approval from our director and being on the same page. So I let her know of my children's interests, which was birds and gardening, and I threw out her my ideas and brainstorming to see what would be most successful in the goals I wanted to produce, as well as her goals that she saw for our center and our budget, and just being on the same page there. We need to have an initial meeting. And then the second step was communicating and connecting with our families about the supplies needed and getting those just straight from the start so we could begin as soon as possible. And then I began by having hands-on gardening activities inside of the classroom before bringing it outdoors so my children had a better idea of the whole process and the expectations before we had our gardening day. And step number 4 was exploring with seeds and the process of sunlight, watering, and other plant maintenance inside the classroom first. And this would help play with the overall success of our outdoor plants because it's more of a communal garden, that inside our classroom we could see what was successful, what wasn't, and kind of having the learning curve there of, oh, if we forget to water our plants, what happens? And we do that initially with our plants inside the classroom instead of our communal garden. And then our last one was setting and hosting a family planting day with parent volunteers and parent involvement. The first and most important step of this project was being on the same page as my director and making sure that what I was implementing met the needs and expectations of our center. So I brought 2 really good ideas, one involving birds and one involving the planter boxes. And we decided to save the project with birds for another time. We believe it would also be successful, but because we're just starting this nature-based experience, we wanted to get parents involved from the very beginning, and the planter box idea just provided more opportunities to allow that to happen. So step 2 was communicating and connecting with our families about the supplies that we needed. This is a photo of the planter boxes. They're actually watering jugs from one of our family's farm that they use, and they lasered them in half, and those became our planter boxes. And these were a couple of the messages we sent out leading up to the supplies that we needed, along with the date and time of our family gardening day. Because of my children's age in being 2 and 3, and to play into the overall success of our communal garden with our planting boxes, I wanted to start by providing hands-on gardening activities inside of our classroom first. And I did this by having them plant beets inside little planting pots. To allow my children to understand the process of dirt, seeds, water, and sunlight, and what plants need to thrive and to grow, I wanted to give them an opportunity to experience that in a more controlled environment and an environment they're more comfortable in, which is our classroom and our everyday routine of caring for their beets. And so we implemented this in our routine and our daily curriculum before we introduced the planter boxes. And this allowed them to learn individually what happens if we leave the sunshade up or down too long, if they get too much sun, not enough sun, or if we choose not to water our plants. A couple of my friends found out that if they don't want to spray their plant when everyone else is, that theirs does not sprout. But this was definitely a learning process, and I think played into the overall success of our planter boxes later on. Was giving them the routine and experiences first before having it in a more overwhelming environment and experience. And then our last step was hosting a family planting day to allow for parents to come and volunteer and also be involved in this process. Because a lot of our materials were donated, we wanted to make sure that parents felt as appreciated as possible. And we had, again, just an overwhelming amount of parent volunteers show up on this day and put in all of our little plants. So these are pictures of us putting in the fence planters, and we put our tomatoes and our basil in these planters. Here is a picture of me explaining to my kiddos how to sow seeds into the soil. So I did the first one, and then I allowed parents to help their own children make their own rows of seeds and sow into the seeds. And for the children who didn't have a parent with them, me or other teacher volunteers assisted them in putting the seeds in the soil. And that was the only time where it was teacher led or where they had parent involvement, was just putting the seeds in the soil. But we had a couple other sensory bins where children could just explore with the dirt. And so that's the red bucket to the right. That one was just for digging and exploring, where they could ignite their curiosity. Problems and solutions. Problem number one, our planter boxes on the fence line got too much sun and none of those plants survived except for two, our basil and our tomatoes. So just something to be aware of is your sun exposure. And second, and this isn't really a problem, it's just something to be aware of if your space allows it, is that there was dirt everywhere. But I'm almost proud of that because not only did we have two planter boxes where children learned, how to put seeds, how to sow them, how to water them, but we also offered other options that weren't guided by adults. And that was, you could engage with the dirt however you'd like. If you wanted to pour it on the ground, you could. That children were not limited and they had a space to explore completely on their own. Maintenance and care. After our first two planter boxes, the yellow and the pink, you can see, they got a lot of sun. They might be savable. I did call in a parent help and I said, how do I make this successful along with having the kids' involvement? And she was able to give me some pointers. And so the maintenance and overall care is children every single day. But a lot of that plays into our teachers and, my knowledge behind these plants and what the next steps are. So I do have a parent who is helping me with that process. And then on the right, we switched out our planter boxes, the ones that fried, with new plants. But we treated it as a learning experience for our kids. We didn't just swap them out without their knowledge. We showed them this is what happens to plants if they get too much sun and they don't get enough water. And we want to make sure that our plants have a balance of everything that they need to thrive. And when your plants die, you mix them in with the soil and they help other plants live. So that was a great learning experience for everybody. My biggest takeaway from this project is that nature play does not have to be big and complex. And even providing experiences such as this one don't have to be expensive. Um, if you have an idea in your heart and you're looking for parent volunteers, it's okay to send a message out to your families. I guess I was overthinking the step. I thought that if we sent out a message that it would feel like we're forcing their hand to provide materials that they had to pay for. But at the end of the day, that was not the case. We had a family who they are farmers and they just had these materials on hand and they were more than willing to extend them to us. And then the farming day was a big hit for parents to be involved in an activity with their 2 and 3-year-old. And my biggest reflection is not overthinking providing nature with children. My biggest advice I could offer anybody starting a nature-based activity or project, especially with planter boxes, is don't get stuck in the product or producing. If I was solely focused on producing tomatoes or producing a successful garden, I would have never started. I would have been overwhelmed. But because I was more focused on the process and learning alongside my children, we were able to have success. And we were able to fully embrace the process, the good and the bad, and treat what didn't work as a learning opportunity, such as our plants getting too much sun. So my last piece of advice would be do lots of research on plant maintenance before you begin and the amount of sunlight exposure you might have. And here are the references that inspired this project.